All right, welcome back. Chapter 3. This is part 4. Last I left off, we said we would talk about switch statements. So let's do that. Let's get in and talk about switch statements. And this is a little bit more of an easy way to kind of do an if else statement. And they're designed to be like an if else else if, an if else if statement. Similar to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to check what is stored in this variable. In case it's a 0, then we will do all the code after it up until the break. If it's 1, we would do all the code after the 1 and up to the break. Now it's important to know that if we didn't have a break, and let's say in this case status is a 2, we will actually do this code and keep going, including to do the next case's code all the way up until we hit a break. And that's important to know, is that without the break, the code will keep going. So you have to have a break. And finally, having a default says if none of these cases are true, then do this set of code. So this is kind of a show of what this looks like, a little bit more visible. And again, because we are doing a switch on its status, it's doing a check on this. That's not a good symbol to put in here, right? We're doing a check. Is the status 0? Then do this code up until you meet a break. When you hit a break, it will exit out of the switch. If it's not 0, then it's going to go look at the next case, and if it matches, in this case it'd be 1, it'll do that code and then break out to the end. So the switch expression must yield a value of char, byte, short, or int type. It cannot be a string. It has to be a char, byte, short, or an int. And it must be enclosed in parentheses. The value 1 all the way through value n must have the same data type as the value that's going to occur in the switch expression. So whatever variable is in here must match these variables as well, the same type. The resulting statement and the case statements are executed when the value in the case statement matches the value of the switch expression. Note that value 1 through value n are constant expressions, meaning they cannot contain variables in the expression, such as, before when we were doing some of our logic up here, we were doing stuff in our condition. You can't do that in a switch statement. So you cannot do that. Some rules about your switch statement. The keyword break is optional, but it should be used at the end of each case in order to terminate the remainder of the switch statement. If the break statement is not present, the next case statement will be executed. So this is what we were just talking about before. If you don't have this break statement and value 2 is the same as your switch expression, it will do statement for 2 as well as the next statement's case until it finally meets a break. The default case, which is optional, can be used to perform actions when none of the specified switch case match the actual switch expression. So in other words, this is the else part. So anything that's under the default, if none of these are the same as our variable in there, then it will run this code. When the value in the case statement matches the value of the switch expression, the statements starting from this case are executed until either a break statement or the end of the switch statement is reached. So let's suppose that the day is 2. And notice in this that there's no code under 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's code under 5. However, there's no breaks here either. The break isn't until here. So let's say that day 2, so we're going to say, okay, this is 2. It matches case 2. But because there's no break, it will continue to fall through. And remember, it's going to continue to fall through until it finds a break. So in this case, it's going to keep falling. And it's going to go all the way to 5. And now it's going to run this bit of code. But now it finally hits that break. So because of that, it now exits out of the code. And this is a great example of that, because in this case, what they're saying is, by the way, in this code, let's go way up here again. Let's clean this page up a little bit so I can show you what they're trying to do, because this is a pretty good example. This is something that can be used in code pretty often. I mean, well, as often as you need it to happen. But in this case, obviously, case 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, these are all weekdays, and case 0 and 6, which 0 obviously is Sunday and 6 is Saturday, is the weekend. So it doesn't matter particularly which day of the weekday it is, 1 through 5, it always wants to print out weekday, where the other 2 days, 0 and 6, is the weekend. And as you can see, our case statements don't have to be numerically in order. They don't have to go through 0 through 6. And in this case, it wouldn't make sense for that, because we want to pick up 0 and 6 as weekends. So that's a good reason to do that. Now let's talk a little bit about conditional operators. If we say x is greater than 0, y equals 1, else y equals 1, we can translate this into a neat little Boolean expression. And this is a shortcut of this entire thing. And this is the magic right there. So what we do is we say this is the expression. Whatever we want to happen will be the first part of this expression 1, and then expression 2 is the false. Now let me erase this and kind of walk you all the way through it with the operators too. So what we're saying here is evaluate this. If it's true, do this, separated by this, because the second expression is false. This is something that is used quite a bit in code, because it's a nice way of saying, like, hey, is the day equal to 6? Then it's Sunday. Otherwise, it's the other days. This is kind of another example. So we're saying, hey, do this math, and then if this math is equal to 0, then do this, which we know, remember, when we do 2, we're checking usually to see if it's even or odd. 0 is going to be even, 1 is going to be odd. So how can we do that nice and neat? Well, here it is. And in fact, this one line is doing several things because it's going to output through the system.out print line whatever happens within this parentheses. Well, within this parentheses, we're saying, hey, is number 2 equal to is the number modulus 2 equal to 0? Then make the number is even. And if it's not, then say num. Whoop, my pen didn't change. Then the num is odd. So please remember, sometimes the pens, when I pick one out, they don't switch as fast as I'd like them to. All right, so what this is saying is, if it's true, take this entire piece of code and insert it as its own piece of code in the system out print. If it's false, then don't do that. Take, because of that colon, take this entire piece and put that into the system.out print line. So there again, we've already talked about this quite a bit. We have our expression there. This is the true, and this is the false side. Remember way back when in math class you had to learn order of operations? It's parentheses and then multiplication, division. In fact, I know that there is a like this little set of initials to remind you. But we had the same thing when it comes to how we do our conditional statements. So operator precedence, this is a good chart of that. We're not going to go through the chart. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you go through it. Make sure you understand it. It's definitely going to be on the quiz. And understand that it goes from top to bottom. So when something is in a conditional statement, in a conditional statement, it's going to, operator precedence is going to be from top to bottom. This is just going into detail of what we just talked about. It's just saying, hey, when there is something that needs to be evaluated, like this needs to be evaluated, it's going to evaluate it in that order of precedence. If you do things like this, like the C equals 5 is going to be first evaluated, right? Because it's the furthermost end of the parentheses. And so whatever this resolves to, it's going to add to B, and so forth and so on. So we've done this, you've done this probably numerous times in math class at some point, and that is we take and we say the inside parentheses is going to happen first. So that evaluates to 7. And then we're going to do multiplication. So this evaluates to that. And then this evaluates to that. Then we're going to do our addition. Addition comes before subtraction. So that evaluates to this. And then we do our subtraction, which is this to that. And finally, we're going to do the greater than. And 19 is not greater than 34. So finally, we get a false. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about debugging. And I believe we probably are going to go ahead and finish up this chapter. We'll see you on the next video. Thanks.